Hi, I'm Tzadeh Aragi for Tzadeh's Magazine, and we're here at 6th and I in Washington, D.C. We're here for Marcus Off-Duty Recipes I Cook at Home book tour. Stay tuned for conversations between food and travel editor Joe Yonan from the Washington Post.
How do you think that your childhood and the combination of things that you experienced, the culture change that you experienced, how do you think that ended up affecting the way you look at food?
And award-winning celebrity chef and author Marcus Samuelsson.
The one thing that I feel like America can learn from Ethiopia is eating with a spiritual compass.
First of all, I want to welcome you to D.C.
Thank you very much. I love D.C. I come back a lot, and it's always sort of the home for our culture, Ethiopian culture in America, and I love coming back.
You really, as you say, you grew up in many ways a citizen of the world. Ethiopia, Sweden, other parts of Europe, New York. And you mentioned the cross-racial adoption, and I do think that one of the things that I find so interesting about your story is that layered on top of this search for identity that I think anyone in your situation would, in any adoption situation would be facing, is this search for even an ethnic identity, possibly. And I'm wondering how you think that has played into your career and even your approach to food. You're now in the, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're now in the epicenter of historical epicenter of African American culture in New York, and this is after a long period of being self-identified with Scandinavian cuisine, even once you first came to America. So, and now you're married to a stunningly gorgeous, I have to say, Ethiopian woman. So the identity has come around.
Well, I think first of all, there's a couple of core values in that journey that I won't trade off. My curiosity and love for food has never changed. And you know, when I was growing up and being a chef, the only food that you were told that mattered was French food. And pretty quickly you realize, well, that's a lie. Because, you know, we eat every day, everybody in the world eats, and it's, you know, majority of the foods are pretty good. So the loss of identity was this fake fabrication created by a lot of men with tall hats. So pretty quickly you realize, like, I love this, I just don't love that, because that's not true.
Right.
And eventually, it's almost like the Berlin Wall. Eventually that wall's going to come down, and people still going to enjoy food. And it did. And it happened. And it was a journey of internet, people being able to travel, diversity, women just crushing the dining scene. They should. They've been the core of the food scene forever, for as long as we can. So all of these things make sense. They just didn't have a vocabulary. So for me, that was just made it easier, right? I was committed to great, delicious food, and I was committed to, and I asked myself these questions, but I had nobody to talk to, basically. When I went to Singapore, and I ate in hawkers street food, and you paid like $3 for lunch, and I'm like, that food tastes better than the expensive restaurant over there. But yet that stuff is not even recognized. But there was no internet, there was no one on the other side of that. But I'm like, but I'm not going to forget about galanga, kaffir lime leaf, curry leaves. When I went to Japan and saw the sushi masters where I worked as an intern, I didn't understand a word, but I saw how precise these sushi chefs were. I'm like, these guys are incredible, but they don't speak French, so therefore their food doesn't exist.
Right.
Like, what is this?
Right.
So, and then I started to study food, and guess what? Most food that we associate coming from France came from Africa. Foie gras comes from Egypt. Wine comes from Egypt. Ethiopia's been making beer way before there was a brewery in Holland. You know, so this is you realize map and compass. So then it's just you keep going. So then, of course, I love French food and I love the techniques, but I also love real complex food from Peru. From, you know, when I think about kitfo, warm beef tartare. How many people have had kitfo in this room? And you guys are so blessed because you're in a city where you can actually get real
Ethiopian
kitfo,
food here, yeah.
right? You can order your tartare warm, well done, rare. It's a beef tartare that comes warm, or the way you would like to prefer it cooked. And that food is not officially even recognized in any guide of Michelin or anything. Now that food is so complex, so tribal, so delicious, so much of a celebration. So therefore you just got to go your own way. And isn't that, when you want food, when you want something, isn't that just all what you want? That's the sole reason for leaving your house, is originality, not generic. So for me, it was very clear that I'm just going to keep pushing, and I'm going to switch it up, and I'm going to challenge myself, because success for me was not a bus stop. I never felt like, oh, I got 3 stars, and therefore, okay, I'm done. I'm like, that was the door to keep searching, keep finding, keep, you know, maybe I feel more like an Ethiopian marathon runner that keeps going. Because arriving at the stop, what are you left with? At, you know, for me at 24 years old, I was left with the work. Well, that's great, because it was the work I fell in love with.
I noticed that you draw a lot of parallels between, you know, cooking and recipes and you know, composing music per se. And so I noticed that you had one recipe in the new book. It's Ethiopian Daughter tostados.
Yes, absolutely.
So what song would that be?
Well, I think, you know, there is a great song with Nas and Damian Marley when, you know, where they use really authentic Ethiopic, you know, I think that's a perfect balance, right? I mean, you think about the injera bread the day after when it's getting a little bit dried. That's a perfect vehicle for tostada, and then you have that wonderful stew that you put on top. Perfect.
How do you think that your childhood and the combination of things that you experienced, the culture change that you experienced, how do you think that ended up affecting the way you look at food, the way you approach food?
I think everything.
Yeah.
You know, on the lighter side, I would have danced iskista much better than the Swede. You know, the way Swede I am, right? I would have been able to dance like the true Ethiopian I am, not just look the part, which is also part of a DNA, right? Because in Ethiopia, it's tribal. You eat tribal, you dance tribal, but yet you're one under Ethiopia. And therefore your sensibilities are a little bit different. I think that food-wise, my language would have been completely different. I grew up with herring twice a week, meatballs once a week, and then mackerel maybe 3 times a week. So we had fish, so our big steak was maybe roasted chicken or pork. It was never red meat, right? And it was seasonal, and our candy was fruit or berries. So our sensibilities was tart, salt, sour versus sweet. Not really, you know, it was just very different.
What would you have been eating in Ethiopia as a child if you had been there?
I think I would have been eating, what I noticed as in Ethiopia is that people don't have a lot, but they eat rich. They eat well. And so that means that you, first of all, you eat, in America we have a lot to learn from Ethiopia, and we can trade because a lot in Ethiopia we can learn from America, right? But the one thing that I feel like America can learn from Ethiopia is eating with a spiritual compass. We eat with a spiritual compass in Ethiopia, regardless if you're Jewish, Orthodox Christian, or Muslim. Basically, 220 days of the year, you're committed to some type of fasting. Doesn't mean you don't eat, you just don't eat butter, you might eat more vegetable, and when you do break fast, you celebrate that. We eat based on a spiritual compass in this country maybe 3 days a year.
Right.
Right? Thanksgiving. Right? And it's powerful when the whole nation eats the same stuff. The leftover the next day. Hopefully we eat like a turkey soup or a turkey sandwich. Super Bowl. It is. And you know, it's pretty much in the
spiritual experience for the Super Bowl.
Well,
I'm still digesting that.
Well, it is with the majority of the population.
Yes, like coming together.
Yeah,
around
coming
food.
together. And then maybe 4th of July in a way, where we think about what we're putting on the grill. But in Ethiopia, eating with the spiritual compass, it guides them, you know, it guides so many other decisions, right? So then the food is health, is clear. If I would measure the amount of allergy kids in Ethiopia versus allergy kids in America, Ethiopia would win that battle. You know, and so there's a lot we can learn from that. There's other things that Ethiopia can learn from America, absolutely. But it's not a one-way traffic. It's not just like we can teach them. So the map, the image that is sent by Ethiopia to the world, that fact that we don't have food, Ethiopia has a lot of food. Ethiopia has given away twice the land of Germany to grow food for countries like India and Saudi Arabia. So it's massive in terms of the food dialogue. It's just different than it is here.
Right.
When you're cooking teff noodles, is it any different than semolina noodles?
Of course, I mean, noodles and respond differently to different flours. So some flour takes on more wet, so you have to have more water. And some flour, like teff is a perfect grain to actually make noodles well. It works really, really well. Plus, you're eating healthier. If you're only eating white flour noodles, you feel in your stomach, and teff is a perfect flour to make noodles well.
You've translated that work so beautifully into the books that you've written, from the Aquavit cookbook, which is gorgeous restaurant, almost coffee table book, although you can really cook out of that book, and
yes.
I have. The wonderful...
There's a lot of cash.
Yes, you do, yes. The ingredients are not the cheapest ingredients, And the other end of the spectrum maybe is the beautiful Soul of the New Cuisine, which we wrote about with you several years ago, which explores the wonderful diversity of African cooking, American food and New American Table.
Yeah.
Now you're focused on this idea of your many influences in your home kitchen. Why did you want to go there next?
Well, I felt that I love, sort of, the making of a book for me takes 5 years.
Yeah, that's great.
Because it's also subjects that are timeless for me. When I wrote the Aquavit book, not in my wildest dream would I imagine that Scandinavian food would be up there with French and Spanish food, but it is today. And that book is the foundation of that, done 15 years earlier in our basement. And that became a vocabulary for a lot of people that had no idea what Scandinavian food were beyond meatballs and gravlax. When I came back from Africa, I came back as a changed person. I said, how come 1 billion people don't have a book that actually, first of all, inspires each other? Because if you're a German cook, you say today, hey, let me cook an Italian dish. Well, let me do just some Greek orzo on a Tuesday or something like that. And you can go down to your deli and get that. Now, a Nigerian woman is not waking up and saying, hey, let me cook some injera for my family. A Moroccan cook is not saying, hey, let me cook some pap from South Africa. So our aspirations of African, and knowing your aspirations are always out of Africa. And I want to create a vocabulary that says, hey, these aspirations are from Africa. Rice came to America, okra came to America, groundnuts come to America from Africa.
Right.
So Africa, in my mind, needed very much a marketing director in a way.
I can hardly think of a better one.
Yeah. So it needed a gathering place, and Off Duty and you know, American Table is really a love letter to America, to the one thing that this room represents. And the one thing we have to cherish, and it doesn't actually have an R or D behind it. It is everyone in this room, we are Americans, and we have our diversity. We're sitting in a place that's gone through 3 different iterations, and I know that will all be delicious. They would be very different. So it's not about authenticity per se, it's about landing and capturing this incredible thing that can only happen in this country. We have each other. We can eat Ethiopian on Monday and Chinese on Tuesday, cook at home on Wednesday, and have sushi on Thursday. No other country in the world can do that. But we also got to cherish it and protect it and learn from each other. And my point is that America in 10 years will be more Latin flavored and more Asian American than ever. And this book is a bridge into that pantry. We've been ordering out that food. We've been going to restaurants for that food, but we yet not started to cook that food because we don't have a vocabulary for that yet. But it's delicious and it's accessible, and you can order online and you can go to a deli to get those ingredients. And miso doesn't mean that you have to cook a Japanese meal. It could actually mean that you rub it on a fish and grill it and serve it with grits. And it's delicious. And only this country can do that. And that's fantastic.
Any special recipes that you would recommend from the book?
Yeah, I mean, the book is really a book that everyone can get involved with. There are chapters like cooking with your kids, because that's something that my family did. You can think about cooking with leftovers, because you think about the first day meal, but also with the second day meal. So I love those chapters, and it's also special days. Not just your own culture's holidays, but I look at things like Kwanzaa, Chinese New Year, Passover, because I want us really to celebrate ourselves, but also celebrate our neighbors.
So in terms of holidays,
yes,
give me 2 recipes that you'd recommend.
Well, for me, I mean, kit was always great for the holidays, and it's cold right now, so a good stew. What could be the really, really, really good stew? So we have a super good, we have like simple as the next day after Thanksgiving, we have a turkey chili, for example. Super easy to make, delicious, and when just getting cold and having that chili, it's perfect.
Just want to make sure that we have some time to hear you talk a little bit about the kinds of things that you do make at home, and about your relationship with Maya cooking together. It sounds like you do some cooking together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the restaurant where we work and live, it's one, and I love that, but it's also very challenging for our family. But it is the fact, right? Dishes start very much at home. Like the other day, we made injera, and it's hard to get teff, so sometimes you have to start with another flour. But I wasn't interested in doing original injera. I'm really interested in doing it with blue corn. So we started with injera at home. Then I take it to the restaurant, and then add in scallion, blue corn, and then I serve maybe scrambled egg and sea urchin on top. So
is that a dish at Red Rooster?
Yes, it's one bite. It's just a nice, fun bite for our snack that night. So I'm interested in the sourness of the injera and the story and the narrative. So I start very often an idea at home, and then we walk it over. And just don't make it chefy, but just make it. So it's always dishes that catch me if you can. If they're familiar in the background, but they yet have a different outcome. And like even Maya, she wouldn't even consider herself a cook, but she's a very good cook, and she cooks the way many of us, and this is an advantage, and this is going to come out wrong, but people that come from strong cooking cultures, they don't even consider themselves cooks. They just know how to do it. It's a vocabulary. It's just like somebody grew up in Dominican Republic. They know merengue. They know it. It's not something, they don't say that I'm a dancer. It's part of your culture. And once money came into our culture, we became good to order in. we lost one of the sensibilities of who we are. Not everyone in this room, because you're obviously very interested, but cooking is a vocabulary, it's of yours specifically, so we shouldn't just say it's gone. So Maya can do stuff like fresh cheese. She knows exactly how to make cottage cheese.
Yeah, great.
She knows how to make specifically kitfo. And she knows specifically how to make certain things, and yet not calling herself a cook, right? And many cultures can relate to that they just know how to do it because that's what their auntie, their mom, their sister taught them how to do. Yet we have to sometimes go to cooking school and do all of that stuff, but we don't know it in our DNA, and that shows. So I say when someone teaches you, when you want to teach someone how to cook, it's just as important as teaching them technology. It's just as important as teaching them a language. It's also your opportunity to say, this is who we are as a family, as a tribe. Because once they leave the house, they're going to go out to the world, right? Eat, deal with the world. But if they have their herring, their kitfo, their samosa, their noodles, they will always remember that. Whatever that is yours. It's your DNA. It's your tribe. And it makes you very unique. You know, and something we should hold on to.
So we recently had a piece in the Post about how people are eating in restaurants actually a lot less than they used to. It's been on the decline. But it doesn't mean that they're cooking at home. It means that they're getting more prepared food and more processed food. And I'm curious what you think some of the keys can be to just, you talked about education maybe of young people, but what about of adults? What do you think the keys are to getting people just to cook more and feel like they can do it?
Sure, but it's a value proposition.
Yeah.
It's a value. How do you, I always say that, how many people have fast speed internet? How many people have fast speed internet? So the majority, like 85, 90%. How many have a car from like 1985? How many have a newer car than 1985? The majority, right? Cool. So we have faster internet, we have better cars. That in my mind means to me that we have more time. But yet, we don't value the time to cook, we value to do other stuff. So it's a value proposition of saying, this matters to us. Like if you ask me what show is cool on TV now, or what is the coolest blog on so-and-so, I don't know any of that stuff. Because my value proposition is food, right? And I'm not saying you should be an obsessed chef, but it's a value proposition. So if you value to watch football for 6 hours, that's a value proposition that I can't argue with, but maybe watch 45 minutes and then you can cook a little bit. Whatever that other stuff is, it's a value proposition that other countries are busy too. But they eat and they cook and their kids eat actually well in school.
Right.
And they're not as obese as our kids, and they get their homework done. It's a value proposition, you know. And I'm not saying countries that we are hard to relate to. I'm meaning countries like that we compete with, Japan,
Yes.
Korea, like countries that are just as busy as we are. So it's a value proposition. So we have to translate and say, this matters. Eating, cooking, eating together, the conversation you have at the tables matters. And if we say that, and if we say that value proposition matters, then we're going to do it. Because we're very smart and quick to change.
Yeah, yeah.
In the book, you have a narrative about Aunt Ginny.
Yes.
Am I saying that right?
Aunt Ginny, yeah, like a supper club, yeah.
So what did she say to motivate you to create Red Rooster?
Well, I mean, Ginny was a lady that my partner, Andrew, grew up with, and she always talked about Harlem and coming back to Harlem and speaking about Harlem from the supper club era, from the first Renaissance era, and that really inspired us to create something new that was of that time, but also added something new.
Awesome. Okay. Right. So where do you go when you're in D.C.? Like what type of restaurants do you go to?
Well, I think I got it. One day we'll go and do this with Talia. You guys come with me. I'll show you where to eat in D.C.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Appreciate it, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks.